And so speaking of your case study, should we jump into a few of them? And that's probably going to spark some questions with some people. So I'll just share my screen with you and just let me know.
There is one question already up if we want to do that while you're getting the screen up.
Yeah, cool. Let's do that.
Okay, so Jeremy's asked, can you add a bedroom inside the cross lease property by altering the inside walls without permission, i.e. not altering the outside of the property? It's a really fantastic question. Yes, you can. It depends on what they call what's the terms of the lease of the cross lease. So some of them will say you just need the other owners to sign off because especially if it's a structural alteration. Structural alterations you have to get building consent anyway, so you might as well get the other owners to sign it off as well. As long as it's all consented, though, 99.9% of the time it's not going to be an issue.
Okay, so even if it's like internal, the other neighbours don't know about it, you've still potentially got that obligation to let them know.
It depends on it, yeah. So it depends on how what they call the memorandum of lease is written as to whether internal alterations need to be consented by the other owners.
Okay, interesting. Another blooming good reason to get someone to check your lease out so that you know about that stuff as well. Has my screen come up for you?
Yes, it has. So this one is, can you flip the next page over?
Sorry.
And then they'll tell me exactly which one case study it is. Okay, so this one's really interesting. This one, my clients were purchasing a property here in Whangarei, Cross Lease. Properties, flat 2, they were purchasing flat 2. So if we go 2 slides over, so that shows the original flats plan for the property. What happened was on this one, there was a tiny little, it was half a metre out from flat 2 on the far left. I'm looking at my screen. So into the area that's labelled as, I think it was B, on this one for a dining room extension. Now, because that alteration altered the external dimensions of the property, the bank wouldn't lend on it unless we had the vendor's undertakings that they would fix the cross lease. So the vendor, we actually had to withhold funds from settlement until the vendor completed it. And if you go, I think flick on the next couple of slides. So that one there, if you look on the top left-hand corner, you'll see a tiny little sliver. Yep, right there. That's what was added onto the property, and that's what caused the property to be defective title.
That one
little piece, yep. So that cost the vendor $20,000 to fix.
Jeepers.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing. That was us going through and looking at the pictures of the property online, and also having a look at the title and making sure things matched. And when the bank came back, it was actually the valuer that the bank came back with the valuer and said, okay, it's a defective title. And I was like, yes, we've been through it. It is a defective title. So we negotiated with the vendor for that to be fixed. They would have, at that particular time, the banks were being extremely, extremely hard on anything cross-lease and defective. So it took about 6 months for it to be fixed.
Right. Okay. And then so could your clients live in the place and do their thing? So we completed settlement. They were living in the property. The property had already been surveyed by the time settlement came through. It's just a paperwork thing in the background. Once the property's surveyed, it's all paperwork in the background that's done. So you just don't even know what's going on. It just flicks around and you just pay bills, pretty much. Yeah. So that's what you end up with at the end of the day, is a proper, like, an updated title. Now, this particular property, they did actually approach the front unit to see if they wanted to freehold. And when you freehold and you've got 2 different owners, you can actually share the costs. It's a more cost-effective way to actually do it too. Unfortunately, the property owner at the front didn't have the funds to do it, and I believe the firewall in between the 2 units wasn't quite up to date, so it would have been a little bit more expensive to do the freeholding, because the firewall in between area 1 and flat 1
needed to be up to date, up to current building codes.
So that's probably a pretty good thing to point out as well, that when you're going to do the subdivision for this, the buildings and the firewalls need to meet like today's building code. Is that correct? If they were done back in the day and certified, it's all good. But if it's being surveyed up today, it needs to be it.
It really depends on each individual council or local authority as to what their requirements are. But it's worth it for insurance purposes anyway, especially if you own multiple units, to ensure those firewalls are up to date. Because it can then rear its head if you ever went to sell off one of the units. Because when you freehold it and you share a wall, there's a thing called a party wall easement that we have to put in, because you're sharing a wall between two properties, and then you have to make sure it's up to fire code anyway. So it's worth it for insurance purposes in the long run, anyway.
Okay, just a quick question that's in the questions I think is probably relevant to this rather than saving to the end. And it's just asked that like the $20K to freehold it and the $20,000 cost to the vendor, was that just for the survey, or there's a whole lot of other stuff that
so that's the surveyor, that's your resource consent. So your survey, that's just a ballpark figure. That's around about what it potentially costs. So yeah, surveyor, resource consent, with a resource consent, and you also need a town planner to write up your resource consent applications. Potentially you also need to add an engineer in there, just depending, especially if you're, or a fire engineer, if you're needing to certify firewalls. And then that's also all your LINs fees. So when you subdivide or add easements or anything like that, where a surveyor has to register a new plan, a surveyor's costs in LINs, so Land Information New Zealand, are significantly more than what our costs are. They've got very special systems that they have to use. And then that's your legal fees, and all your issues, because you issue a new title. It's all your easements, updated easements, your updated lease, like your land information costs alone, and that $20,000 are probably anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000.
Wow. Okay, that's a fair chunk.
Yeah, it's a fair chunk of just stuff that we have to pay out before we even get money from the client.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Should we jump on to the next?
So that was, and that's just showing an update of what that's a case study 2, and this one will be, I think this is Onarahi. Yeah, so this is the one that I was talking about earlier. So if you look at the left-hand side on flat 1, there's a garage on that. So somewhere along the line between when that property was originally made to a cross lease, that garage was actually removed from the house, and then they built this lovely, beautiful 3-bay garage still in the area A, so the exclusive use area. So the new garage didn't make the title defective. It was a removal of the old garage that did. So if we flick over 2 pages, next one.
Sorry.
Oh, no, where'd it go?
Is that this one here with the garage?
And that was the updated plan that we were getting ready to submit, but it was actually 2 of the unit owners that behind it that were part of the cross lease that said no, they wouldn't consent to updating the title. That stopped that. So you can see area 1A is where the new garaging was. Area 1 is the original dwelling. And area A is their exclusive use area.
And the whole thing got stopped because there was a garage that was connected, and they removed the connected garage, but they could do whatever they like with 1A.
Yeah, yeah, because it's not attached to the original leased structure.
Interesting. Okay.
That one was a really curly one for us, and it took us a while. Like, I actually ended up having to go to the one up because we'd never had it where somebody had actually removed something from a title that was from a leased area that was actually attached and enclosed and then removed from the leased area. So that was a bit of a curly one. So that one was really, really interesting for us.
Okay, cool. And then we'll just move on to the third one, and then once we finish the third one, we'll have a bit of a sum up, and then we'll jump into the rest of the questions that are there.
So this one was another property in Whangarei. Our clients were selling it. It wasn't a defective title, but if you go to next page, so flat 2 was what they were selling. Really, really simple structure. But if we go, and then go to the next page. So this is what we call a consent of leaseholders. This is what we do up to get other leaseholders to consent, where there's been alterations to the leased dwelling that are not enclosed. So towards the left-hand boundary of that property, there was a carport added. Because it wasn't enclosed, it doesn't make the title defective. And then to the rear of the property, they actually put a they put a roof over the top of a deck. But because it's not enclosed, it's not classed as a defective title and doesn't need a resurvey. So all we needed was the consent of the leaseholders, and the bank was happy with that. And our client sale went through nicely, and they had a very happy first home buyer that purchased that.
Okay, awesome, cool. So yeah, I suppose just to quickly wrap this up, we've got a few questions there. I suppose my biggest takeaways from the stuff that I've learned tonight around this is the fact that if you're making some internal changes to a cross lease property, you actually need to go in and check with your lease that you're actually allowed to do it, and that you don't need to go and check with the neighbors that's the thing. And that if you're putting a detached garage on your own section, that's all good. But as soon as you want to put an attached garage onto something where we're going to have issues with the title, seems a bit counterintuitive, but just is what it is.
So anything that's attached and enclosed is a defective. Anything that's not attached but enclosed, you're fine. You just need to get other leaseholders' consent. And anything that's attached but not enclosed, or depending on your lease, internal alterations, you just need the other leaseholders' consent. And that's really simple. You can do it up yourself. 99.9% of lawyers and conveyancers will have a base document that you can use. And you just go knock on your next door neighbour's door and get them to sign. I've never run across somebody that hasn't consented to alterations that are not attached and enclosed. But yeah, it's relatively simple as long as it's not attached and enclosed.
Okay, awesome. Makes sense. So Rochelle's asked here, why do cross leases even exist in the first place? And sort of what purpose do they serve versus having a freehold title?
Cross leases were a developer's cheap way of subdividing a property that started, I want to say it was back in the 50s, they really started to become a thing. That developers back in that day, then they didn't have to get a consent to add multiple units. They just had to update the title and show all these units on it, and away they went. It was just a cheap way to make more money on a property. It's now coming back to bite people now, because you just don't understand the implications of making it. It's a Kiwi thing. You want to increase the value of your house. So there's so many cross leases that are defective in New Zealand. Because somebody adds a room, you add a conservatory, you add a garage that's attached, and away you go.
Okay, makes sense. Bulgan's asked here, so upgrading the aesthetics, or what about upgrading the roof of your property?
So just again, depending on what your lease entails, I have seen some memorandum releases where you can only use specific colours on the roof, or you can. But as long as you're not affecting the other owners, units or properties, you can upgrade your roof tiles. You can repaint your roof. You can repaint the house. You can you can change the decking. You can add a fence. You can do whatever you like, as long as it's within your exclusive use area, and you're just upgrading the aesthetics of the property. There is nothing wrong with upgrading the aesthetics of the property, as long as it's within the confines of your lease.
Cool. So it's really that thing of check your lease document, make sure that with all the pages and the old writing or the typewriter that typed it up.
Yeah.
Check that you can understand it and check what you're allowed to do.
I mean, like for us, if we're got a cross lease, we make a list of, you're allowed pets, but you're not allowed to be noisy. That's a pretty standard one. It's very rarely that there's one that says that you can only go within certain colour parameters, but that's usually when there's multiple units on a cross lease. But if you're on a cross lease and you've got a dwelling that is not attached to any other dwellings, go for your life. You can paint, you can re-roof, you can make the deck look better, you can do what you like with it.
Okay. Awesome, cool.
As long as you're not making a defective title.
Yeah, so that leads on to Anna's question next. So she just wants to clarify. So in terms of like your personal use area, if you decide that you want to put a garage in your area that's unattached, it fits the council daylight angles and all the other things we need to be aware of when we get the building consent. We don't need the consent of the other neighbours unless it's attached.
Right, so you always need, if you're adding a structure, you should always get the other leasehold's consent. 90% of people only get it when they go to sell the property. But if you can have it on file when you do that addition of a unattached garage, but it doesn't make the title defective.
Okay, perfect. William's asked here, how was the Onerahi Road defective title resolved in the end?
It is still a defective title because the other cross lease owners are not consenting to the update. He can take it to court if he wants. There is generally a clause in the lease where it says that they can't arbitrarily withhold consent to upgrading the flats plan and therefore the lease. But these particular owners have really dug their heels in. So they are elderly owners. Our client has decided that he's just going to sit and wait. He's held on to the property. He rents it out. And he's just going to sit and wait until they go to retirement villages, and then he'll wait until they sell their houses and try it again then.
Okay, cool. And what sort of the ballpark figure of converting, just say like a simple 2-flat cross lease like on Onerahi Road? What would have the cost been to subdivide them? Obviously, it's a bit of a who knows. But if we said that the firewalls were compliant,
if the firewalls are compliant and you've got minimal easements, your surveying and your resource consent costs, like your initial cost of getting everything updated, surveys, town planner, resource consent are your biggest cost. So if you budget for say $20,000 between two properties to freehold from a cross lease, you can probably get those two properties freeholded from cross lease. And if you've got two properties and you own one and there's somebody else that owns the other one, then you're going to share that cost. So it's $10,000 each. That's probably a starting figure for a basic, fixing going from cross lease to a freehold title.
Awesome. And what sort of uplift have you seen from in terms of your experience from people from a value perspective, or people refinancing out of a cross lease to a freehold?
If you've got the money to go from cross lease to freehold, we're saying, say it costs you $10,000 each, so two properties, $10,000 each, you're probably seeing an increase in value of that property of at least bare minimum double your investment into fixing that cross lease and changing it to a freehold title, if not more. It just is very dependent on the area.
Okay, yeah, obviously, naturally. And then Josh has sort of asked a similar question there, just around the property value and how that differs from like a 3-bedroom house that's cross lease and a 3-bedroom that's freehold. Obviously, there's going to be different capital gains, Josh, depending on where you are in the country. I think, like Kirsty sort of said, that if we get for every dollar we spend, we should, in theory, make $1 as a rule of thumb. But in terms of over the last 20 years, it's probably going to be a really tough one to give you some stats on that without going back through a whole lot of sales data to give you some sort of solid figures.
it's very area dependent. It's like if you had a 3-bedroom freehold and a 3-bedroom cross lease in somewhere. So let's just, for example's sake, in Whangarei, somewhere, say Aotangarei, you're not going to see any major difference in capital gains over 20 years because Aotangarei doesn't have massive capital gains. You might see there might be $20,000 difference between a freehold and a cross lease. So again, you're making $1 for every $1 that you spend. But somewhere that's like Manu or even Beach Road in Onarahi, or I'm trying to think of nice areas that do have cross leases. Kensington and Regent, you're going to make a lot more money and get more capital gains from changing a cross lease to a freehold.
Cool. And so Cindy here is just, I suppose, to recap, just around, so structural alterations, we always need the neighbour's consent, and we always need to check the lease for those ones.
So when they talk about structural alterations, it really depends on the terms of your lease. So structural alterations generally means a structural wall. So if it's not a structural wall, you might be able to get away with not getting lease or consent. Again, it's all in the terms of your lease. So if you know the terms of your cross lease, your lease memorandum of lease, that'll tell you, what you can do with the alterations of the internal area of the property.
Okay, cool. And then final one here, or final one at the moment from Anna's just said that she's just been quoted 39K plus just. Obviously, costs are going to vary from council to council.
Yeah. So I mean, it's councils, it's resource consent costs, it's every area is slightly different. Here in Whangarei at the moment, we're looking at there can be a 6-month lead time for a surveyor, but we have a really varying range of surveyors that are more cost effective to more expensive. So it's all about shopping around. Boundary Hunter, I think it is sometimes really good for getting things through a bit cheaper. So definitely look and shop around for quotes for it.
Okay, awesome. And then Rochelle's asked here, what are the consequences of not getting neighbour consent if it doesn't create a defective title?
The only consequence of that is if you go to sell the property and your potential purchaser's lender says, okay, hang on, this isn't. Usually they come back and they say, oh, it's a defective title. And then we have to argue with them that it's not a defective title. And a prime example of that is we had a client that had built a non-attached garage, and the bank said, oh, that's a defective title. And we went, no, it's not, because it's not attached. And then they wanted the other owner's leasehold consent so that they knew it was all consented and okay. So my biggest piece of advice is that if you're going to sell a cross-lease property and it does have enclosed but not attached structures on the property, or you've added a bigger deck, or you added a carport, that you just go around to your neighbours, get them to sign it off, and then you've already dealt with that before that issue comes up.
Cool. Awesome. I think that is all of our questions tonight. So Kirsty, really appreciate your time. There's a couple of questions in here asking if it's recorded. If you want the recording, just let us know, and we can get that out to you. We'll also get the PDFs out to you as well. If you want a copy of the slides, we can provide that as well. Reach out, and thanks very much everyone for the time. I see Tanae's just put a link in here for the PDF that you can jump onto, and then that'll get that for you. But once again, Kirsty, really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for showing up. And if you've got any queries or questions about it, make sure you reach out to Kirsty, ask her. If you've got any queries or questions for us, reach out. We'll be more than happy to help, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Hadley.